In the early morning of Sunday, June 12th, 2016, a 29-year-old man named Omar Mateen carried out the worst mass shooting in United States history. Before this, the worst mass shooting was the one carried out by Seung-Hui Cho at Virginia Tech in 2007. At Virginia Tech, 32 people were killed and 17 were wounded. Now, in this more recent mass shooting in Orlando, Florida, about 50 have been killed and 53 injured. What happened is Omar Mateen went into a gay nightclub named Pulse in Orlando, Florida, and started shooting people. In the end, he was killed by police. And this event, it was apparently the end of Gay Pride Week in Orlando, so I guess maybe the club was really crowded at the time, and there was also some type of Puerto Rican event going on at the nightclub, so there were lots of Puerto Ricans in the club at that point in time. Now, the shooter, Omar Mateen, was armed with an AR-15 rifle and a handgun, and I believe that an AR-15 is the same type of rifle that was used at that Sandy Hook shooting when the kid went in and shot all those children in an elementary school. So the club did have armed security. There was a police officer who was working security at the door of the club, I guess, and when the gunman, I guess, approached the nightclub, he got into a shootout with that officer, and after engaging the security guard cop guy at the door, the shooter ran inside the nightclub, and then two other police officers arrived and started shooting at Mateen. And at that point, and then Mateen eventually went into the bathroom and took hostages. And so the incident, the shooting began, or the Mateen went into the nightclub, or he started shooting at the police officer outside the nightclub around 2 a.m. And I guess that was, I'm not sure what the laws are in Orlando, but I think that it would be when the club was going to be closing. So he shot at the cop outside the club. Then he ran inside the club, and eventually, and I guess the police must have followed him inside the club, and maybe there was a exchange of gunfire within the club. Eventually, Mateen ran into the bathroom and took hostages. He took some people hostage there, and after about 3 hours with him inside the barricaded inside the bathroom, the SWAT team drove an armored car through the wall of the nightclub, and they shot I guess there was a shootout again, and they shot Mateen dead. I think the whole situation ended around maybe 5 a.m. So it started around 2 a.m. and they killed him around 5 a.m. And so the reason I believe that the casualties were so high is that you had this took place in an enclosed space that was probably crowded. I mean, if this was a popular nightclub and there was a special event going on, there would have likely been a lot of people in there. It may have been crowded. Then you had the shooter, Mateen, exchanging gunfire with the cops. So there's a potential that more people could have been killed in the crossfire. So you have bullets flying in both directions. And just because if it was a crowded nightclub in an enclosed space, and it's hard to get to the exits, then people would not necessarily have had the opportunity to try and run and duck and hide from the gunfire. They wouldn't have been able, maybe they couldn't move. I don't know. I'm not sure what the venue was like, but maybe they had trouble getting away, because normally I would assume that if there's a crowd of people on the street and someone starts shooting, everybody's going to scatter, everybody's going to run. So you won't have not as many people get killed, because they're not all in one place. They're not all, they don't stay all in a crowd where they can all get shot easily. they're gonna all move and scatter. But if people are inside a nightclub and it's crowded and they don't have the opportunity to move and scatter, then someone like that can just shoot into the crowd and injure a large number of people. So now let's look at who the shooter was. So the shooter's name is Omar Mateen, and obviously with a name like Omar Mateen, that sounds like a Middle Eastern type of name, or a Muslim kind of name. And actually he was the 29-year-old son of immigrants from Afghanistan, which obviously Afghanistan isn't exactly in the Middle East. It's more, I guess, Central Asia, maybe even South Asia, but it's not. But it is close to the Middle East. Now, so Omar Mateen, his parents were immigrants from Afghanistan, but he was born in New York City. He was reportedly married. So these are some of the reports that have come out about him recently. And so since these are just early reports, I don't know how much of this is accurate, if all of this information is accurate, but so they said that he was married to a woman he met online for a short period of time. And according to her, she said that he used to beat her and that her parents eventually came to take her away from him. So they were only married for, I think, a short period of time. And so they got married in 2009, apparently. They lived together for maybe a few months, maybe 4 months, and then the parents came. I guess she complained to her parents that he was treating her badly, so the parents came and took her away. And Mateen's ex-wife was born in Uzbekistan, according to one of the reports I read. Now, I've read reports that he was formerly a jail guard and also a security guard at G4S, and that he had a firearms license, and the firearms that he owned were legal. So the AR-15 and the handgun were legal. According to some reports, he got married again, and he had a 3-year-old son. So I saw some reports from neighbors saying that he lived with a woman and they had a kid together. Now the question that a lot of people ask is whether this mass killing was a product of Islamic terrorism, because Omar Mateen, he was from Afghanistan, he was a Muslim, and also during the shooting, in the midst of the shooting, he called 911 and said that he wanted to pledge allegiance to ISIS. And since the shooting, ISIS has claimed responsibility for it, and I guess they've hailed him or whatever, put out the press release saying that they supported the killing and everything. So the question is this a product of Islamic terrorism, or is it just some mentally ill individual or disturbed individual or whatever? So the way I look at it, there's two different traditions of mass public violence. Well, I'm sure there's lots of different traditions of mass public violence, but the main ones that are important here, are of interest here, are first, you have the political Islamic extremist tradition, which has been seen in places like Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Turkey, Egypt, Tunisia, Algeria, Kenya, Nigeria, Pakistan, Ivory Coast, Burkina Faso, Mali, France, and Belgium. Then you have the Western style mass killing, which happens a lot in the United States, but it has also taken place in Canada, UK, Germany, Scandinavia, and so on. Now, the Islamic extremist type mass killings typically involve a group of people going into a public place with guns and bombs and killing lots of civilians. You've had attacks on hotels, malls, religious buildings like churches and mosques, airports, airplanes, trains, public transit places, buses. Now, typically you have a group of people, a network of people involved in these kinds of attacks, and they often have some political motivation. So, for example, when French soldiers intervened against Al-Qaeda or Al-Qaeda affiliated group in Mali, then later on there was a terrorist attack at a hotel where lots of French people stay. Kenya intervened against Al-Shabaab in Somalia, and then later on, then they've been these Al-Shabaab attacks on malls, school campuses, and buses in Kenya. And those are obviously kind of like a issue of retaliation, where these groups are attacking civilian targets that are kind of somewhat linked to the countries that are attacking them. In some cases, you have direct political motivation. In those cases, you have direct political motivation, and sometimes you have direct religious motivation, like when those people in France attacked the Charlie Hebdo cartoonists for insulting the Prophet Muhammad. That was pretty much a clear religious motivation there. And the shooters were also, I think, pretty much had ties to ISIS or Al Qaeda. They had to be through training camps and stuff like that. Then you have the other type of mass killings, which are more common in the United States, which are the individual type of mass killings. And those are things like those school shootings, Columbine, Virginia Tech. When the postal workers that go to the people go to the workplace, shoot up the workplace, that type of stuff. The guy who went in the theater in, I think it was Las Vegas, the guy went into the theater, shot a bunch of people, those kinds of things. Those are the more individual things. There was also that guy in the United States, I can't remember the state, but he went into a black church and shot a bunch of people. Those are the Western style mass killings, which tend to be more individualistic. Usually you have a lone shooter working by themselves. Sometimes you may have two shooters working together, which is probably a little less common to have two shooters. Usually these shootings are more motivated by individual factors, like some guy lost his job or his girlfriend left him, and those people may claim political motivation, but it is often a more individualistic thing. So I would say that with the shootings where the people are part of a network, it's more like maybe they get an order or something, and they're gonna do it. They're gonna carry out the shooting no matter what. Whereas I think with the individual shooters, it depends on what's happening in their life at that particular time. If something is going wrong with their life, then they're more likely to go out and carry out the shooting. If their life is going good, maybe. So, for example, let's say you have somebody who's thinking, an individual is thinking about carrying out some type of mass shooting or something for some political cause, and they're doing it by themselves. If something good happens in their life, maybe they'll not go ahead with the shooting. If something bad happens, they may be more likely to do it. But with the network of shooters, I think they'll do it they'll participate in the shooting regardless of what happens in their life, because it's more of a group type of thing. Like I said before, Mateen, he was a Muslim. He called 911 to pledge allegiance to ISIS during the shootout at the nightclub. However, he carried out the shooting alone. And one more thing, I think he actually has some type of connection to some suicide bomber from the United States, and the FBI questioned him a few years ago. Okay, so he had there's some things that would suggest that it was some type of Islamic terrorism type of thing. But on the other hand, Mateen carried out the shooting alone. There's no evidence that he was acting under direct orders from ISIS or some other Islamic terrorist group. It seems like this was more of an individualistic Western type of mass killing than an Islamic extremist network kind of mass killing. Now he may have been motivated by that ideology, but he was most likely acting alone, or he may claim to follow that ideology, but he was acting alone, and there's no evidence that he was doing it under direct orders from any type of terrorist network. So I think this is more of a individualistic type killing, and I'm not sure that ISIS has any motivation to want to kill a lot of gay people. I mean, in the United States, I'm not sure if that fits their political motives.